Okay, Math 3, Unit 7, final review.
Nikki,
So
you're finally here. Sorry, I couldn't hear it.
Shout out.
we can leave it, I don't really care.
Yes.
Unless that bothers you, Nathan. Okay. All right, so today we're talking about circles and parabolas, okay? The first thing is remember you have a general equation for circles, okay, which is right here. And with circles, remember, you need to know the center and the radius, okay? And so here's your formula. Remember that your center is h comma k, and anything that is in parentheses becomes the opposite when it comes out. And then your r is your radius. Okay. So this first example, it's already set up in the correct form, in the general form, standard form, descriptive form, okay? And so what would be my center for this circle? 2, -1 is correct. Okay, the radius is the square root of the answer here at the end, and so the square root of 64 is 8. Good. Okay, example 2. Again, this is already in the correct form. The center of this circle is what?
It is -5, 8.
Good, -5, 8. And then my radius would be the square root of 4, which is 2. So, and one thing I'm always careful about is that in your parentheses, notice how it says x. So when you're setting that equal to 0, you're getting the x value of the center. Okay? In other equations, like for a parabola, sometimes you'll have the x in the parentheses, sometimes you have the y. So whatever's in the parentheses, it's telling you where that piece of information goes. So it's not always here, it's like wherever the x or the y should be. I don't know if I'm making sense. We'll get to it when we get to parabolas. Okay, so this one, we want you to write the equation. So we're basically going backwards. We're taking this information and we're gonna write it into the correct form. Okay, so I'm just gonna give you about 20 seconds to give that a try. Already done? Okay. So we have our parenthesis. It's going to be x what?
+2.
Good. X plus 2 squared plus, and it's going to be y what? -1 squared equals 25 because we have to square the radius. And that's correct. That's the equation for that circle. Okay. So that stuff I think is pretty easy. Now here, if you notice, it is not in the correct form. And so when it's not in our standard form, we are going to use completing the square in order to get it into the correct form. Okay, you'll notice that like x's and y's are kind of all mixed up in here. So we need to put all of our x's together and all of our y's together, and any number that doesn't have an x or y, it goes to the opposite side. Okay, so starting with the x's, we would write this as x squared plus 8x and then plus our blank, because that's where we're going to end up completing the square, okay? Plus, we have y squared minus 6y plus blank. Now, this positive 3, we're going to move that to the other side, and when we do that, it becomes a -3. So when I have my equal sign here, I'm going to have a -3, and then what else?
2 blanks.
Very good, 2 blanks. And I have 2 blanks on the right side because I have 2 blanks over here on the left side. Okay, also remember that if you ever had a number in front of these parentheses, that you would need a number in front of this blank as well, because it would mean you're going 5 times that blank or whatever. Okay, do you guys remember how to complete the square from this point? Okay, what do I do? Good, we take our x term, which is 8 in this case, divide it by 2, and it becomes
4.
Very good. What do I do now?
Square.
Square it, and that is good. And then what do I do with that information? Good. This first blank on the left and the first blank on the right. Okay. Next, what will I do?
Divide by 2 is a -6.
Nicely done. -6 divided by 2, which is -3. We square that, which makes it 9. Good. Okay. Now, what do I do now?
Then you do x plus 4.
Good. So now remember the whole purpose was to change this trinomial into a square. Okay, so if you're factoring it, it's x plus 4 squared. The shortcut is that it's whatever this half number is goes into that spot. If you wanted to just factor it, you could, but it just would take you time that you don't need to. Plus, and so the y squared minus 6y plus 9 as a square is going to be what? Good. Equals, and then what do we do on the other side?
Get them all.
Good, we combine all these numbers together. And so negative 3 plus 16 is 13, and 13 plus 9 makes
21.
22. I know, not as exciting, but. So now that we have this information, we can find the center. What is my center?
It is
Negative 4, 3. What would be my radius on this one?
If you want to be root 22.
Yeah, we would just write the radius as root 22. We'll go ahead and put that on here just so you see it, but it wasn't what they were asking for. So if it doesn't simplify, then you just leave it as square root of 22. And you could put in a calculator and get the decimal form of it, but. Okay, so we're gonna do the same thing here. For time's sake, we're just gonna kind of do it together. So we need to first start by what?
Getting them together.
Getting all the correct terms together. Good. So I'm going to start with my parenthesis for my x squared. And we have that as x squared and then what? Plus 4x plus blank. Now, and if you wanted to, as you're going through, you can kind of cross the things out that you've used so you don't leave anything off. Does y squared have anything that's supposed to go with it? No. So we're just going to write that as plus y squared. It's already a square. There isn't a y term with it that we would use to divide and complete the square. This one's done. Okay? And then we take the negative 5, we move it to the other side, and when I do that, it becomes a positive 5. And then what else do I still need on the other side? Just one blank. Good. Because I only have one blank on the left, so I only need one on the right. Because we always add them in order to balance both sides. Okay, so next we're going to go 4 divided by 2, which is 2. And 2 squared is, good, 4. So 4 goes in each of these blanks. How do I write the x as a square?
X plus 2 squared.
Very good. So we have x plus 2 squared plus y squared equals 9. Okay? On this one, they only ask for our radius. So what is my radius? 3, because we take the square root of 9, which is 3. What is my center, though, on this one, just for fun? Good. Negative 2, 0, because nothing is being added or subtracted with the y, so it's 0. Okay, questions? All right, this next one I feel is slightly more complicated maybe, but there's like 2 questions I think like this on your final, so you want to make sure that you get this. So we know our distance formula is this. Okay, do you guys kind of remember that formula, hopefully? Okay, so you know like on a circle, you have your center, and then you have all these points. Well, all these points out here, the line from here to here, each of those is called the what?
Radius.
The radius. So the distance from 2 points, if I have 2 points like the center and a point on the circle, then I can find my radius. Does that make sense what I'm saying? So knowing our center, which is like right here, and knowing a point on the circle right here, if I use my distance formula, I can find the radius. Then I can write the equation. So all we're going to do is take this information and plug it into our distance formula. Okay? So I personally always like to label these as like xy, xy, so I don't mix them up when I plug them in here. How it says xy, x1 minus x2, you can subtract either way. You just have to be consistent with your x's and also with your y's. So when I'm actually finding my radius. So instead of writing d, I'm going to write r because that's actually what I'm finding. And then I'm going to subtract the 2 x's. This is where you need to not mess up because I have 5 minus a negative 3. And what happens when you have 2 negatives like that? It becomes a plus. Okay? plus, and then I'm going to subtract my y's, and since I started with the 5 with the x, I have to start with the negative 3. So I have negative 3 minus 4 squared. So when we simplify this, 5 plus 3 is 8, so I have 8 squared plus negative 3 minus 4 is negative 7 squared. Good. Okay, 8 squared is, and negative 7 squared is positive 49. And you add those together and you get the square root of 113. Good. So that means that this distance right here is 113. So from those 2 points is the square root of 113. But the question was, they just want you to find the equation. So tell me.
X minus 5 squared.
Good. X minus 5 squared.
Plus y plus 3 squared.
Y plus 3 squared.
Equals root 1, or not, 113.
Very good. Equals 113, right? Because in our equation, it's always r squared at the end. So whatever value you get for r, you square it. If there's a square root, the square root just goes away, right? Okay, and so that's the equation. So not too difficult. Any questions? Okay, so now we are going to talk about parabolas. Parabolas. Yes. This right here. Okay. So remember that parabolas, they are our U-shaped graphs. Okay? And so when they're y equals, this is, remember, where they curve either up or down. And I don't think I said it wrong. We're going to go back and play it, Jordan.
You didn't say it wrong. I'm just trying to hear you.
It's okay. All right. So if it's x equals, remember, and so I kind of put some notes here with these, is that your curves are going with the y-axis when it's y equals. And when it's x equals, your curves are going with the x-axis. That's how I remember, okay? So these are equations for parabolas, okay? So you're always going to look at the problem. If you have x squared, you solve for y. If you have y squared in the problem, you end up solving for x, okay? The other thing, remember, that we talked about is you have this 1 over 4c. And so in order to find your focus and also your directrix, so we have here our focus and our directrix, you have to use the 4c value. And you always, so whatever number is in front of your x squared, you take the reciprocal of it and you set it equal to 4c, and then you solve for c. That value gives you the distance from the focus to the vertex, and then also to the directrix. And we'll do some examples so all this makes sense. So let's start with example 7. This one, though, they're just asking for the vertex. So the first thing you need to do is just get it into the correct form where it's x equals or y equals. So what would I do in order to get this into the correct form? Good, just subtract 1. So when I write this one, I would have x equals negative 4 parentheses y plus 7 squared minus 1. Now this is where I was talking about previously. So if we're finding our vertex, anything in parentheses we set equal to 0. So this is going to end up giving me y equals what? Negative 7. So you need to make sure you put this in the y spot. It doesn't go in the x spot because this is y here, so it goes with the y spot. So that's a negative 7. Anything that's not in parentheses just stays the same, so that means my x value is actually what? Negative 1. And so there's your vertex. Do you guys feel like this is coming back to you? A little bit? Okay. All right, so next one, they want us to find the directrix. Before we do anything, you always want it to be in the correct form. So the first thing I'm going to need to do here is what? Good, add 4 to both sides. Okay, so when I do that, I have y equals negative 1 over 20, and this is x plus 3 squared plus 4. So in order to find the directrix, we first need to know what our vertex is, because I like to kind of graph this. I think it's the easiest way to find the information. And so what would be my vertex on this problem? Good, negative 3, 4. Okay, and so we're going to go ahead and draw a little graph here. And I'm gonna go -3 up 1, 2, 3, 4 and make a point. Now, which way will this graph be curving? Down. We know it's down for two things. Number one, it's going to be up and down because it's y equals, so we curve with the y. And it's going down because the a value is negative. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and just make a curve. We're not going to make this super accurate. We just know it's going to be going down. Okay. Now, in order to find our focus and directrix, and specifically for this one, they want the directrix, we have to set 4c equal to the reciprocal of our a value. You don't have to worry about negatives and positives, okay? So we're gonna go 4c equals what? 20. We divide by 4 to both sides, and so I get c equals 5. Now, what that means is, and I put this on here, your focus is always inside the curve. So from your center to get your focus, you would go inside the curve 5. So you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That would be my focus. Your directrix is always a line, and if you notice right here I put this, it's a dotted line outside the curve. And so we would go then from our center, or sorry, vertex, we go up 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that would be my directrix, and it's that line. So where is that line at? That's y equals 9. And that's your directrix.
So the C is the focus.
The C gives you how far you go from your vertex to get your focus and to get your directrix. Okay? Thank you. Okay? All right, so we're going to do the same thing again. Okay? Now, this one sometimes looks confusing. Notice this is squared. So x squared, that means since we have an x squared here, we want to get what by itself? No.
No, Y.
Y. Do you see how there's a number in front of here? This is good. You want it that way. In order to get rid of that number, because you want to get rid of that number first, what would you do?
Divide.
Good. Divide by 8 to both sides. So what's going to happen there is, I'm going to write this here to the side so I have enough room. Y plus 3 equals, and you write that as 1/8, and then x plus 1 squared. Okay, what's the next thing I would do on that one?
Subtract.
Good, subtract 3. So these cancel. We get y equals 1/8 x plus 1 squared minus 3. So what is my vertex for this? Good. And so again, I like to make a little graph to help myself out, and I'm going to go -1, -1, 2, 3, and make my point. And which way will this one be curving? Up. Good. Okay. So that helps me because I know the focus always goes inside the curve, the directrix always goes on outside the curve. And then how do I find the distance to find that?
And you put 4C equals
4c equals 8. So it's always the reciprocal, okay? And it says that up on top too. We divide by 4 to both sides, and c equals 2. So from the vertex, I'm going to go up 2 because I know that the focus is inside there. And so that ends up being at what value? -1, -1. So that right there is my focus. And the directrix, we would do the opposite. But since we don't need to find it, we're just going to leave it that way. Okay, 10. Put the equation in a form that would make it easier to graph. The easiest way to graph it is if it is in your standard vertex form. Okay? And so we're going to have to complete the square for the parabola. When you're completing the square for the parabola, again, we're going to put all of our x's in the parentheses. So we have x squared plus 12x plus blank. The -2 we keep on the outside of the parenthesis. And then do you remember what we do for that blank, since it's going to be on the same side as the blank I already have?
No, subtract.
Yes, yeah, it was the first thing you said. So since we're already adding a blank, in order to make it balance, you would also have to subtract a blank. So with parabolas, when you're completing the square, both blanks are on the same side. Where like with the circle, you had blanks on opposite sides, which balanced it. Okay, so this is like adding 3 and subtracting 3. Adding 3 and subtracting 3 at the same time makes 0. So they're balanced out. So you can do that. Does that make sense? Okay, so in order to complete the square, what will I do? 12 divided by 2 is 6. 6 squared is 36. Put those in our blanks. And we get y equals what?
Y equals
X plus,
6
good?
minus 2 minus 36. Which
So we
is
combine those and it'll make minus
36.
38. Okay, same thing on number 11. We want to find the vertex, so we're going to have to do the same type of thing here. You always want whatever you're solving for to be positive. So you wouldn't have like an equation that says negative y equals something. We want to, yes.
Why is the 36 in the right
Why is this blank negative? So that's what I was just talking about. That we're on the, it's okay, we're on the same side of the equation. And so in order to balance it, to make it that you're like not actually doing something, you're not changing things, you have to add and subtract because you're on the same side. With circles, see how they're on opposite sides of the equal sign? So you can balance those by adding to the both sides. But parabolas, you're on the same side, okay? All right, so on here, I'm gonna go ahead and just add y to this side because we're gonna have to complete this square for x squared because we have the x squared term. So if I just move the y, that'll make y positive and then I don't have to move anything else around. Okay, but I'm gonna end up flipping it because I always like the y to be on the left. So when I do this, we're gonna go y equals, when you are completing the square, actually let me rewrite this first. So I'm gonna write this in descending order, 5x squared minus 30x plus 2. So we have to complete the square, but when you're completing the square, you can't have a coefficient in front. So that's when we factor out the 5, okay? So I would write this as y equals 5 parenthesis, and then what would be inside?
X squared minus 6x
Plus blank. Good. And then because I have, and then I still have, sorry, the plus 2 on the outside. And then because I have 5 times the blank, I also need a
5
minus 5 times the blank. Okay? Because it has to balance. So this is really saying 5 times the blank, so we need negative 5 times the blank to balance it. Negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. Negative 3 squared is 9. So we get y equals 5 parenthesis x minus 3 squared. That is 2 minus 45, which makes what?
43.
Good, negative 43. And so that means that what is my vertex?
is 3 negative
3 negative 43.
Perfect. 3 negative 43 is correct. Okay, any questions? All right, these last ones will go pretty fast, I think. Okay, when you want to find the equation of a parabola, first of all, you need your vertex. Once you have your vertex, you're usually pretty close to being done, except for the a value. So on here, what I want us to start by doing is plotting these points. Okay, so the focus is at 2, negative 1. So I'm going to put a point there. I'm going to put an F so I know it's focus. And my directrix is at y equals 3. 1, 2, 3. Your vertex is always in between the directrix and the focus, okay? And if you count here, there is 1, 2, 3, 4 units. So you're gonna go 1, 2 units, and that right there is your vertex, okay? And so my vertex is at what ordered pair? 2, 1. Okay? Now, your C value is the distance. What does C equal? How many from the focus to the vertex? 2. C equals 2. So that means that 4C would be 4 times 2, which equals 8. So your equation will be this. And it's going to be going up and down because of how the focus and directrix is. Y equals 1 over 8 because it's the reciprocal of that. And then x minus 2 squared plus 1. Okay, and I'm going to do this last one really quick. If you need to leave, you can leave, but I'm just going to finish it on this video. So, okay, x equals negative 2. So x equals negative 2. That goes up and down because that's the directrix. This means that on this one, the equation will be x equals. Okay, the focus is at 4, 0. The distance from the focus to the directrix is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that means my vertex is going to be counting 3. 1, 2, 3. So my vertex is at 1, 0. C in this case equals 3. And so 4 times 3 equals 12. Okay? This is where you have to be careful. So we know it's x equals, the A value is 1 over 12. Inside the parenthesis will be y. And so that means it's going to be y minus 0. So that means I'm actually just going to write that as y squared. And then plus 1. And so better, I would write it as x equals 1 over 12 y squared plus 1. And that's your equation. And we're done.